Macmillan, and this is just a brief intro. He joined CFA Institute in October 2008 after more than a decade as a professor of accounting and finance at Johns Hopkins University. He also spent some time at George Washington University School of Business. Prior to pursuing his career in academia, he was actually a securities analyst and a portfolio manager at Bailard, Beale and Kaiser, as well as Mercos Capital in San Francisco, which is in California. So in his substantive role as the Director for Ethics Education, Dr. Macmillan, who I just call Mike, Mike is responsible for creating and developing educational content for CFA Institute members and investment professionals, as well as anything relating to ethics and professional standards. He's responsible for providing ethical decision-making workshop for pension plan trustees, like I said, right around the world, from Europe all the way back, as well as for investment professionals, regulators, and university students. So lastly, given that this is an abridged intro, he has a PhD in accounting and finance from George Washington University, MBA from Stanford University, and he has a BA from University of Pennsylvania. He's a chartered financial analyst. He's a certified compliance and ethics professional. He's a chartered investment counselor, and he's also a CPA. There's much more that could be said, but my throat is going dry. So without any further ado, let me just hand you over to Dr. Michael Macmillan. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you all for coming today to our governance and ethics workshop. And I emphasize the term workshop because a workshop is designed to be interactive. It's designed to provide you with information, but equally as important, it's designed for you to ask questions or to make comments so that the learning goes both ways. So today what we're going to do is we'll talk about some governance and ethics issues, but I'm also going to place you into some real life ethical dilemmas that pension trustees have told me that they have faced. And then I'm going to give you an opportunity to vote using your cell phone or using your computer on what you would do. And again, the voting is anonymous, on what you would do if you found yourself in a similar situation. So I hope you find this enjoyable as well as a learning experience, okay? And I do have to say that we are in a, as you know, in the United States, we are in a virtual world. So I do these workshops on a virtual basis often, but I do have to say, working with CFA Society of Jamaica and the pension plan trustees, this is one workshop that I wish I wasn't doing virtually, but that I wish I was there right now, standing in front of you, working with you on a face-to-face basis, because I love Jamaica, love coming to Jamaica. So I'm sorry about that. But anyway, here we go. So let's see. Let's go. All right, so just a quick agenda. We'll talk about some lessons I've learned from the pandemic about investing, some characteristics of good governance. We'll talk about some ethical issues in investing from a pension plan trustee's perspective. CFA Institute actually has a pension trustee code of conduct, which we'll talk about. One of the big topics pension trustees always face is the issue of conflicts of interest. And finally, we'll talk about the key document that I'm sure you all have and I'm sure you all view on a regular basis, and that is your investment policy statement. So here we go. First, I just want to tell you this. This is the mission of CFA Institute, and I want to mention that after the financial crisis in 2008, we actually modified our mission. So prior to 2008, our mission was to lead the investment profession globally by promoting the highest standards of ethics, education, and professional excellence, period. Then the financial crisis of 2008 occurred. And as you were all very aware, as a result of this crisis, many people lost their homes, even more people lost their jobs, and even more people lost their life savings. So we began to think about this at CFA Institute, and we realized that if we could raise the educational level of those involved in the investment industry, not only investment professionals, but investment decision makers such as yourselves, and if we could increase the ethical behavior of those who work in the industry, that would ultimately benefit society. So that's why we added that last line, for the ultimate benefit of society. So I love this quote. I modified it. Warren Buffett said, "Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked." Well, I modified that to say, only when the market declines do you discover the true risk of investment products. And this is what has happened not only with the current pandemic, but with also previous market declines. You see, when the stock market or the financial markets are rising, all the products that are sold to pension plans, institutional investors, etc., are fine. Nobody cares. They're doing well. But when the market declines, that's when the real risk of these products becomes obvious or becomes apparent. And that's when investors go, oh, well, I didn't realize that the product or this investment would perform in this way when the market declines. So here are some of the lessons that I've learned or takeaways that I've learned from the pandemic. The first is that financial planning and financial preparation are as important as asset allocation. So many times as trustees and as investors, we think about, well, how much should we put in stocks? How much should we put in fixed income, without really stepping back and saying, where are we going over the next 10 to 15 years? Do we have enough cash? Do we have enough money to cover what is going to occur with the pension plan over the next 10 to 15 years? So preparing the pension plan and planning for the future is as important as just figuring out what proportion of the assets are going to be invested in a particular asset class. Second, it's really important to have an understanding of the impact that poor or improper investment advice can have on participants and beneficiaries. As trustees, you are accountable and responsible for the appropriate management of the pension plan assets. And it's important for you to understand the significant impact that your decision-making perhaps can have on the well-being of the participants as well as the beneficiaries of your plan. Third, we need to focus on risk, the downside, and less focus on potential or the expected return. Normally, when an investment professional is marketing or selling a product to you, they'll talk about, oh yes, we expect the return to be 8% annually, or we expect the return to be 12% annually, but not as much is said about the risk of the product. If the financial markets decline, how is this product or investment going to perform? If you invest, I'm going to make up a number, if you invest $1 million in this product, how much of that $1 million can you stand to lose? So it's very important to focus upon risk and less on the potential return. Trustees must understand the features and characteristics of the investments that you own in the pension plan. And you have to assume that the money that you are investing is your own. If an investment manager or a consultant can't explain what their investment style is or what they are investing in a manner that you understand, then you don't need to make that investment, and perhaps you don't need that investment manager. It's imperative that you have an understanding of the features and characteristics of the investments that are in the pension plan. Trustees must have a greater understanding of the products and strategies that are recommended. This goes to what I said earlier. You should question the assumptions underlying the product's expected performance and risk. You must ask questions because, you know, as we had this president in the United States called Harry Truman, and his big expression was, the buck stops here. Well, when it comes to accountability, responsibility, and the performance of the pension plan, the buck stops with you. Greater focus on liquidity. Cash is and will always be king, regardless of the low returns it may generate. As we've seen the markets decline, some of these markets have not come back. So what do you do if the market declines for a year or two? Will you have enough liquidity to pay for the benefits that are due to beneficiaries? So definitely focus on liquidity. And if someone could mute their computer, that would be great. Last thing is, equities are great long-term investments. The minimum holding period should be at least 5 years, because when you do have long and sustained market declines, history has shown that eventually the stock market does come back, but that return may take 3 to 5 years. It may not be 3 to 5 months or so. So these are some of the key lessons I have learned. Let me just stop and say, does anyone have any comment or questions about what I have said so far? All right, I will continue. So let's talk about governance for a moment. And the quote says, knowing others is enlightenment. Mastering others requires force. Mastering the self needs strength. So you as trustees need to understand your fellow trustees and need to understand those investment managers and consultants that you're working with. You also need to understand yourself and feel comfortable with the knowledge that you have when it comes to making investment decisions. And then it's important to work with your colleagues to make sure that when you do make a decision, there is consensus, everyone has been heard, and there is consensus on the decision that is being made. So, word on governance, nothing can guarantee that the fund won't experience disappointing investment outcomes. However, a strong governance structure is your best assurance that if such a result does occur, it won't have been caused by preventable weaknesses inadvertently designed into the investment program. So again, nobody knows when the next pandemic is going to occur or when the next global financial crisis has occurred. But if you have done proper financial planning and proper financial preparation, if you have ensured that the fund has sufficient liquidity during periods of decline, if you have focused and taken into consideration the risk of the investments that you are making, then that's all that you can do. But at least you can feel comfortable and you can speak to those beneficiaries and participants who may question, why is the fund down by 15, 20%? You can say, these are all the things that we have done to ensure that we have thought of every possibility or most possibilities.
Sorry, Mike, before
Yes.
you go on, Galaxy A10, there, I said a raised hand.
Yes.
I'm not sure, could that person go ahead for me? Not the name that isn't displayed. Galaxy A10.
All right, maybe you're on mute.
Okay, we can continue. Perhaps when they reconnect, they will, pose a question to you. Continue, Mike.
Okay, all right, but yeah, please, I do encourage you to ask as many questions as possible because we really want to make this as fulfilling and satisfying from an educational perspective as possible. So let's talk about some characteristics of good governance. Due diligence, have you done proper due diligence on the managers you have selected to manage the plan's assets? Are there checks and balances in place? What type of reporting is done by your investment managers, and what type of monitoring do you do of the managers? Is there transparency? Do you know what they're doing? Do you understand what they're doing? Do the statements that they are providing clearly reflect what their strategy is? And are you complying with industry best practices? So I'm going to talk about some of these in a little bit more detail. So let's start off with accountability. The obligation to report, explain, and be answerable for the consequences of decisions that have been made on behalf of participants and beneficiaries. You are accountable. If you were standing in a room with some of the beneficiaries or participants of the plan, would you be able to report and explain and answer to the decisions that your plan has made? Okay? Transparency. Participants should be able to follow and understand your decision-making process. Just as you, as a trustee, need to be able to follow and understand the decision-making process of your investment managers, you, as the trustees, must be able to explain to your participants how and why you made the specific decisions that were made. they should be able to clearly see how and why a decision was made, what information, advice, and consultation was considered, and which requirements, when relevant, were followed. This really comes down to taking good notes and minutes during your pension plan meetings so that there is a record of what you did, why you did it, and it should include some of the information I said in the transparency. Good governance, you should follow the rule of law. Decisions are consistent with relevant legislation or laws and within the power of trustees, okay? So have a good understanding of the laws. You know, the regulators will certainly tell you what laws you need to follow. So I think that's self-explanatory. Responsive. The needs of all participants and beneficiaries should be served while balancing competing interests in a timely, appropriate, and responsive manner. And as trustees, there is a trade-off between the interest of beneficiaries who are being paid out of the pension plan currently and participants who are putting money into the plan currently, but who expect to be paid out from that plan in the next year, 5 years, or 10 years. There may be investments that have immediate payoffs, which is good. There may be investments that have long-term payoffs. I'm going to take private equity as an example. Private equity may be an appropriate investment, but private equity is relatively illiquid. So you make private equity investments with participants in mind, since the payoff of private equity is not going to occur for another 5 years or so. So those investments are for participants. They are not made for current beneficiary, since there is no liquidity or expected payout from private equity in the current or immediate future. Other characteristics: equitable, inclusive. It's important to include and consider the interests of all participants and beneficiaries in the decision-making process. All groups, particularly the most vulnerable, should be given the opportunity to participate in the process. So I don't know how things are structured, but do you have an opportunity to, like a townhouse or a town hall meeting or so, to have participants and beneficiaries voice their views on how your pension plan or how their pension plan is being managed? I think that's very, very important. So they don't believe that there is some black box or there's this mysterious group of people who are making these decisions which they don't understand or perhaps may not agree with. Effective and efficient. Decisions should be implemented and processed following the best use of available people, resources, and time. So when you have meetings, be effective and efficient. Come in, make decisions, make sure everybody has read the material beforehand so that they come in, all of your colleagues come in ready to talk, as opposed to trying to learn or cover this material as the meeting is going on. Participatory. Anyone affected or interested in a decision should have the opportunity to participate in the decision-making process by being provided with information, asked for their opinion, and given the opportunity to make recommendations, or in some cases to be a part of the actual decision-making process. All right, let me just stop here and say this. I understand, there's a risk that we have this expression, too many cooks spoil the soup, if you will. So you don't want to have everybody in the world involved in the decision-making process, but it is important to make participants and beneficiaries feel like they have some say in the decisions that are made. Having said that, it's also really important that every trustee sitting at the table, views and opinions should be heard as well as respected. These views and opinions should be fostered, and it should be encouraged that there is consensus on a decision as opposed to one or two people making the decision. Because as I said, you are all responsible and accountable for the decisions that are made. All right, so let me just stop here. Any other questions or comments?
Debbie, you can go ahead from NWC.
Hello.
All right, good morning. How are you doing?
Yes. Good.
So, in looking at the slide that you just showed,
yes,
you spoke about, the one before this, you spoke about responsiveness. So my question, and you spoke about equitable and inclusiveness. So for responsiveness in this particular aspect, it's responsiveness as it relates to just the investment opportunities and ensuring that the funds are being invested properly and timely and all of that? Or does it also work hand in hand with equitable and inclusiveness to ensure too that we are responsive to the needs and concerns of the beneficiaries or pensioners?
Okay. Two things. One is you have, everybody heard the question? Okay. So first of all, I just want to say that you have two stakeholder groups who you are responsible to. The two stakeholder groups are one, the current participants in the fund, and the other stakeholder group are the beneficiaries, those who have retired, who are now withdrawing assets from the fund. Sometimes the interest of those two groups may differ because the beneficiaries are all they really care about is whether the pension plan right now has enough assets to pay them, right? That's the beneficiaries. The participants, on the other hand, are not concerned about the present. They are concerned about whether the pension plan will have enough funds when they retire so that they can withdraw assets. So that's what I meant by by responsiveness, balancing the competing interests and thinking about those competing interests at the time you are making investment decisions. All right, so then the second part is accountable. Each and every trustee should be able to stand in a room by themselves with a group of participants and beneficiaries and report and explain and answer all questions that these participants and beneficiaries have. And it's important to say each trustee should be able to do this, which means that you can say, well, I don't really understand this. If my colleague trustee understands it, let them take the responsibility for it. No, Each one of you is responsible. Yes. Did I answer your question?
Maybe does that answer your question?
Because it's in and out, but I believe so. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And I'm sorry I'm cutting in or out. I think my connection is strong, so I don't know. So
Yeah, Jimmy Lawrence here. With respect to the responsibility to both participants and beneficiaries, though, it would depend on the nature of the fund, because if it's a defined benefit, then I understand and agree. But if it's just a defined contribution fund, then it wouldn't apply with it.
that is true. That is true. With a defined contribution plan, all you're really doing as trustees is making sure that there are enough investment, that there are sufficient and appropriate investment alternatives available for the participant to make the decision on which investment product or fund is best for their needs. But I also want to stress that if you are a trustee of a defined contribution plan, then part of your responsibility is education, because it's the participant that is responsible for deciding which of the various investment products that are being offered is the most appropriate for their needs and objectives. So your job is to explain or to bring in someone who is conflict-free to explain why you invest in this investment product versus that investment product, etc. Because as a defined contribution participant, they need to make sure that there's enough money in their own plan for them to withdraw when they retire.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Sorry, just Sanya Goff here. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Make the point that the majority of the defined contribution plans in Jamaica don't facilitate investment choice. So you don't really have a situation where members direct or choose how their individual accounts would be invested. I mean, unlike a retirement scheme, which are DC funds, that takes place. But the employer-sponsored defined contribution plans tend to still be driven by the investment manager's input and the trustees' input on behalf of the collective participants in the plan.
Okay. Oh, all right. That's
so I know that in a lot of the more kind of developed pension frameworks, there is a lot of member involvement and investor choice.
Yes.
And that's typical. And I imagine that's the perspective you have on it. But in Jamaica, we don't really have that. It's very uncommon for your typical employer-sponsored DC plans to have members involved in investment choice. So I would say that because that's the case here, many of the comments you have made apply across the board for DB and DC funds.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification. Yes, yes.
Just one thing to add, though. The members are represented by trustees that they have elected. So I guess that would be a consideration in terms of a direct or maybe slightly indirect, but representation on their part nonetheless.
Right, and the thing is that last year, this was discussed at the presentation in terms of the member representation, of view that your member nominated trustee is your representative, as if it were a trade union representative, is actually not correct. Members have a say in how the board is constituted, but when the trustees enter that board of trustee room, the deliberations, they're not holding a member brief or a pensioner brief. They are there to look after the interests of the plan and the beneficiaries as a whole. Mm-hmm. So we need to move away from a mindset that we have, many trustees have, that oh, I'm the member trustee and I'm only here to bat and lobby for the interests of members. The fact is that you don't hold a particular constituent representative capacity when you are a trustee once you enter that room. So just to make that point that you are to balance the interests of all the participants.
Yes, yes. And that's what I meant by inclusive and responsive. Very, very much so. Yes.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Magdalena Cooper here. I came a little bit late just now, but what I have found in Jamaica is that a lot of the trustees and the employers are not establishing these plans, whether superannuation funds or retirement schemes, with the goal or the objective in mind. What's the goal or objective in mind? Based on the law, that is. The goal or objective in mind, whether it's a DB or DC plan, is that if you're in the plan for 37 and a half years, you're entitled to 75% of your remuneration at your actual retirement date.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have found is that we have kind of, and I posted it just now, we've kind of said, well, if it's a DB, yes, and if it's a DC, no. And I'm saying no, because the law doesn't make any distinguishing feature. All that the law is saying there is that if in a DB plan, the employer is committed to taking the risk, like what in COVID-19 now. If in a DC plan, it's the members who take the risk and the employer doesn't have to do anything about it. But the objective is still the same. How do we do the investments and communicate to the plan members that this plan is established based on the laws of Jamaica to give you 75% of your remuneration, because I found that the term remuneration is not being used at all. And the Income Tax Amendment Act is very clear on the definition, and everybody's skirting around it. It can't be. And I'm very, very disturbed about that. So the formula is there, whether in a DB or DC. The only thing that is there that we know of is who is going to take the risk.
Mm-hmm. That is true. That is true. So what do you think needs to be done? Do you think that trustees of DC plans need to be more aware of that 75% remuneration and have their activities influenced by that goal?
Yes, in response to your question, I thank you so much for that question. The first thing is, I don't know which country you're speaking from, and forgive me, I'm not being rude when I ask this.
No, I'm from the United States.
Okay, great. I'm even more happy. Let me tell you what, in my opinion, has happened. Whereas in the United States, there are many tertiary universities, IFEBP, a lot of organizations that are providing training on pensions so you can't get into certain positions if you don't have some kind of certification in that area. In Jamaica, there's none. So what has happened is that everybody now has to find a way, and you know, depending on what's your status, you say, okay, this is what I think it is. No, when you speak to a USA trained person in the area, they either say 401k, IRA, 403, whatever the case. You bring up that conversation in Jamaica, and everybody's talking about a pension plan. They will never say a superannuation fund or retirement scheme, regardless of whether they're speaking to the trustees, the employer, or the plan members. So that's one of the main problems we have: lack of training. Once you can get the training ingrained into the society, then a lot of the issues a lot of the law will cause you to say, okay, you know, probably we ought to look at this and see how we could get this amended, because this might be better. Because remember, you know, that a superannuation fund retirement scheme and NIS and NHT are there on a macro basis to prevent poverty. It's poverty reduction plans, those are, you know. So in the event of disability, old age, and death, the state doesn't have to take on that liability. And I find that a lot of people don't speak like that in Jamaica. They speak with what I call it artificial insemination. Somebody 10, 15 years ago said something and everybody pick it up and they carry on. No, we've got to have training. I want to be able to speak and I'm trying. I'm practicing with you, Mr. Macmillan. But I want to hear my local people speak like you and speak with that passion from the law. But it's very difficult for me to get it because the training isn't there and we need to do some more training. I don't mean to be rude to my colleagues in the industry, but I am just so glad to be invited to this and to hear you speak.
Well, thank you so much. But to your point, one of the reasons why we are doing this session now is partly to provide that training, and part of the responsibility of the CFA Society of Jamaica is also to provide that training. So this is only a starting point for further classes and courses to provide the type of information that you believe trustees and everyone else needs will have. And as you may know, the CFA Institute, we are a nonprofit organization. We do not have ties to any bank, investment firm, or whatever. Similarly, so that we can provide, hopefully, objective and informative information of the type that you are looking for. So believe me, and I think believe CFA Society Jamaica, that this is only the first in a series of sessions where, you know, now we're talking about broad topics, but in succeeding sessions, we can really focus upon particular topic areas that perhaps only a subset of the pension of the trustees are interested in.
Yes.
Before you go on, may I just say to Madalena, may I just say something? The session that we have between 11 to 12, based on the panelists, we'd love for you to bring forward some of these issues. We'll have the president for Pension Industry Association of Jamaica. We'll have senior director securities from FSC, as well as an asset manager. So the points are valid, and I think we can address them more fulsomely between the 11 to 12 after I'll take the coffee break.
Okay, all right, great. So I'm just gonna, here's some ethics policies that I ask you, do you have or should you have? One is, do you have a gift policy? If you do, and again, these are just questions. I'm not gonna tell you what the policy should be, but the question is, do you have a policy at all? And if you do, are trustees aware of it, and do you review this policy on an annual basis? What kind of policies do you have in terms of dealing with vendors, suppliers, investment managers, and consultants? Can the trustees use vendors and suppliers who they are related to, who are they best friends with, etc.? What type of policies do you have with working with outside organizations? Conflicts of interest. Do you have a conflict of interest policy? What type of policies do you have regarding outside business interests and the use of your pension plan affiliation? As trustees, are you able to obtain some benefit by saying, oh, I am a trustee of XYZ pension plan? Again, this is not, this slide here is not to be prescriptive and tell you what you should do. The purpose here is to ask yourself whether you do have policies in place which cover some of the issues raised here, okay? All right, so let's talk about due diligence. You know, due diligence is very important. again, ask yourself, have you conducted background checks on the managers, of the investment managers or the consultants? What is the track record of the fund manager? Who will independently value the securities in a manager's portfolio? There have been huge scandals about managers who invest in illiquid assets and then improperly value those illiquid assets to increase their value. When you're dealing with an investment manager, who are their service providers, their brokers, administrators, accounting firms? What are the firm's risk management policy? What are the fund's strategies and their associated risk? How liquid is the fund? How easily will it be to liquidate your investment in it? Have you visited the firm and spoke to key personnel? Again, this is just providing you with a framework and some questions. Perhaps not all questions are appropriate or all activities recommended here are appropriate, but these are things at least that you should start with when you are interviewing or when you're talking about your current managers, as well as starting to interview new managers, okay? Monitoring, that's equally as important. Do you understand the fund's performance given its strategy? Okay, that's a requirement. Do you understand the fund's strategy and the risks of the markets it's invested in? What is the fund's leverage, concentration, and volatility? Again, some of these questions may be relevant to you, others may not be, but at least these are some of the broad questions that you should be asking. Is the fund adhering to its risk management policies in terms of diversification, position limits, the size of its holdings relative to the markets in which it is investing? Is the manager adhering to the fund strategy? How fast have the assets in the fund grown? Have you subsequently conducted periodic on-site visits and meetings with key personnel? Is the fund manager willing to answer questions about the information contained in quarterly statements? And again, here is the point. You are the client. You have every right and you have a responsibility to ask these questions and to demand these types of requirements for the people who are managing the fund's assets. And let me just say, for the people who you are paying to manage the fund's assets. And if managers are not willing, or you believe are not forthcoming in providing this information, then perhaps you better think about getting another manager, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about ethics. This is how we define ethics at the Institute. Ethical behavior is doing the right thing when no one else is watching, even when doing the wrong thing is legal. You know, one of the reasons why people were so angry at the investment industry, especially after the 2008 financial crisis, is because so many of the activities that precipitated the financial crisis were legal. They just weren't ethical. And I want you to make sure that you're aware that the law really represents the minimum standard that we all must follow. Ethics represents a much higher standard. The law tells us what we can and cannot do. Ethics really focuses upon what we should and shouldn't do. And often there's a big gap between the law and ethics. Just keep that in mind. This is how we define ethics at the Institute. It begins with education. As pension trustees, it's important for you to not only understand the laws, rules, and regulations that you must follow, but it's also important that you have some understanding of investments as well. You are not going to be an investment expert, and no one expects you to be an investment expert. What we are expecting as a participant or beneficiary is that you are engaged enough that you are going to ask these managers proper questions, one, and two, if they do not provide the appropriate answers, that you ask it again until you are satisfied with the answers that they provide. So ethics has got to begin with education. Ethics also requires trust. And remember, trust is earned, not given. So trust has got to be proven. And listen, as an elected representative of whatever stakeholder group, they are placing their trust in you. Honesty, expect honesty, integrity, character, and stewardship. So these are all of the requirements that you as a trustee we're looking for in order for you to be ethical. And let me just explain to you what stewardship is. Stewardship really is the careful and responsible management of money that is entrusted to one's care. So you are, you as a trustee are sort of in the same position as a doctor, right? We go to the doctor when we're not feeling well or something hurts. When we go to the doctor, we explain to them what's bothering us. They, in turn, ask us a series of questions. And after giving us a checkup, they tell us what we need to do in order to make us get better. Well, we are placing our trust in our doctor, and we, in turn, expect that doctor to carefully and responsibly manage our health in our best interest. That's the same way, that's the role that you play as a trustee. These participants are saying, here's my retirement money, and I expect you to carefully and responsibly manage that money solely in my best interest, okay? All right, so what do we mean by ethical decision-making? It's simply the process of evaluating the moral implications or consequences of a course of action. Almost every decision that we make has some type of ethical or moral implication to it, as well as a consequence. Every decision an investment professional makes, as I said, has an ethical dimension because it has an effect on others. In this case, your decisions have an effect not only on the investment manager and consultant, but also on the participant and beneficiary. Now, ethical dilemmas occur in a gray area where there often is no obvious decision or course of action to take. Therefore, they require judgment and interpretation, which is why honesty, integrity, character, and stewardship, that's why those qualities are so important. Yes.
Mike, before you go on, this is you. So there's a question in terms of the point that you just made about, the arguments that you have forwarded, whether the employers will now are expected to employ professionally trained trustees just to carry out some of these mandates which you just outlined.
I don't. They could employ professionally trained, but I think I think it's good to have trustees responsible, the trustees from elected to participate in the decision-making process. I think that you don't need to be, as I said, an investment professional to make some of these appropriate decisions.
I agree.
Agreed.
Yeah, no. I agree. You know, here's the problem, and I'll tell you this is a little bit off script, but you know, investing is not as complicated as sometimes it's portrayed to be. It really doesn't have to be that complicated. What sometimes intimidates people is the terminology that is used. But once you sort of understand, oh, this term is not that complicated, or once somebody can break it down to you in a simple and straightforward manner, then you won't be intimidated. And again, this is part of the reason why we're having these training sessions, is to take some of these complicated terms or complex terms and sort of break it down and say, this is really what it means. So don't feel intimidated the next time that some investment manager sort of says it, because now you'll, one, not only understand what that investment manager is telling you, but also you will have the confidence to say, I don't understand what you are telling me. Can you explain it in a clearer manner? Because again, after all, this is your money that you are paying this individual to manage. And if they are unable or unwilling to explain something to you in a clear and concise manner, then perhaps you may need to get another investment manager. Okay.
Before you go on, the question from Debbie. Debbie, go ahead, please.
I'm hoping you're hearing me. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Hearing me better?
Yes.
So I hear the conversation on morals, ethics, but isn't there era or gray area as it relates to ethical decision and moral conduct? Because isn't it subjective in some regard as it relates to morals? And isn't it also based on person's perception of what is ethical in making some decision? So doesn't it have, for me, I see shades of gray as it depends on who is looking at it and from what basis I'm also looking at it as it regards to some decisions?
Yes, and let me explain this, because to me, there is a difference between morals and ethics, and we could argue this, but let me just tell you the perspective that I'm using. Morals are really reflect someone's individual values about right or wrong, etc. When I'm talking about ethics, ethics in investing, or an ethics as a pension trustee, I'm talking about a set of agreed upon or accepted behaviors that all trustees or all investment professionals agree this is what is right or this is what is wrong. So that's sort of what I mean. And I'll talk about some of these ethics or morals as they pertain to pension trustees in just a little bit. So hopefully I'll answer your question with another slide. When we talk about our pension trustee code of ethics or code of conduct.
Can I make a quick comment there?
Of course, of course.
I have some superannuation fund trustees who are very clear because of their religious nature. They don't invest in what's the name of the company that does cigarettes again? They don't invest in those kind of industries. And even though they do it very well, they don't invest in them. So I think that is some of the things that the trustees as a group, depending on who they represent, will or won't make a decision. And so you have to look at the portfolio of investments and then see which one of the investment groupings or institutions represent what the ideals and morals and standards that you have as a set of trustees. And I think when you do that, it helps to ease the situation. I want to make one last other comment. What I found is that when you're doing those sessions with employee members on investing, the risk profile questionnaire, it is really very good. It helps the member to understand where he's at and what the choices are, and therefore what the trustee should do in their investments.
Okay. Oh, also, can I just piggyback on that and say, as trustees of different pension plans, you are not in competition with other pension plans. So I think it's very, very important that if you have best practices or if there's some things that you do that is beneficial to your particular plan, that you share it with other plans and other trustees, because again, you are not in competition with them. You are all together with one goal in trying to satisfy the investment objectives of your pension plan. So also, I do want to say this about whether you invest in tobacco or alcohol or guns or whatever. This is important to take into consideration. And I'm not saying whether you should do it or not, but your role as a trustee is to invest in a way that is going to be beneficial to the participants and the beneficiaries. Your personal viewpoint really has no say in the decisions that are being made. So if your pension plan does not have a prohibition against investing in tobacco or investing in this or that, then if it's best for the pension plan to invest in something like that, then I think it's your responsibility to do that. You can ask your participants and beneficiaries, we have this policy that we would like to implement. Would you like to do this? But your particular or personal preferences when it comes to choosing an investment or so really don't have really are not relevant. You are responsible for investing in whatever company is going to provide the best return for your stakeholders. Okay? That may be controversial, but that's who you are investing for. Now, if it's in your own personal portfolio and you don't want to invest in this, that, or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But as a trustee, your decision should be based upon what's beneficial for the plan. All right?
Yes. A question from Lance White. Lance, go ahead for me, please.
Okay.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I am from the Sugar Industry Research, formerly of the Sugar Industry Authority. My question is, the world's largest pension fund, which happens to be in Japan, lost a lot of money recently. It had to be some $165 billion in the first quarter. And this is occasioned perhaps by what is happening around us with the pandemic. Is this a trend that we all should take note of, and how can it be avoided? Because this is significant.
You mean, how can you avoiding taking losses?
Yes. Is this something that could it be avoided?
Okay, all right. So let me just say that investing by its very nature is an uncertain activity. We don't know what's going to be the return on a security or on an investment today, tomorrow, or next week. We can do research, we can ask questions, we can do our due diligence, but that's all that we can do. Nobody could have foreseen this pandemic and the impact of the pandemic on the global financial markets. So we'll never be able to see the future, but what we can do is make sure that we have taken some of the steps that I outlined before, that you've done financial planning and financial preparation, that you do have an appropriate level of liquidity, that you understand the investments that are in the fund. That's all that you can do, you know?
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Mike, before you go, let's do a time check. So, and we need some response from all the trustees. So yesterday we were told, some trustees indicated that they would not have the stamina to go all the way up until 12 o'clock our time. So they had asked for a little coffee break before we begin the 11 o'clock session. So we don't want to truncate the questions that are coming in discussion. So I guess what I want to put to everybody is, can we go until 10:45 Jamaica time? We take a 15-minute break and then we resume for the 1 hour session, 11 to 12, given that I know Mike wants to take us through a few cases. So can we go to 10:45, take a 15-minute break, and then we resume for the final session with Sania Goff, Cornelia Apropeg, Marie James?
Yes, yes.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. And again, keep those questions coming. When you ask questions, it means that you're engaged and there are things that you want to know about or things that you want to say. So happy to answer anything. I also want you to recognize, so the goal of our workshop today is just to make you more conscious and aware of your own thoughts and behaviors so that you can think about some of the issues that I raised earlier. Ethical dilemmas are a normal and predictable part of many aspects of the pension industry. So we want to discuss some of the approaches for dealing with these ethical issues if you should confront them. So here's what I want everybody to do is, if you have a cell phone, an electronic device around, please go to this website, www.slido. You don't have to worry about the backslash, slido.com. And then your login should be PFAJ. And the login is not case sensitive. All right, so while people are doing that, we're going to start off easy, okay? So, fun example. You are a trustee who is traveling on business for your pension fund.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michael, 1 second, please. Could you just
yeah,
repeat
sure,
the website?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody with me?
Can you just leave it there for a minute?
Oh, sure.
.do. SNI.do. Okay.
Mike?
Yes.
Just to say, just to observe that this example was used last year.
I'm sorry. All right, can I go? And I'll go back to this screen once I show you what the case is. Okay, so You are a trustee who is traveling on business for your pension fund. Due to flight delays, you don't check into your hotel until 1 a.m. in the morning. Because room service is no longer available and you are starving, you eat an $8 pack of cookies from the minibar. Later the same day, after walking back to your hotel for meetings, you stop by a local convenience store and buy an identical pack of cookies, let's call them Oreos, in order to replace the Oreos you ate from the minibar. So tell me, have you done anything wrong? A, yes. B, no, because you saved your pension fund money. C, no, because the cookies you bought are fresher than the ones from the minibar. D, no, because now the hotel staff does not have to inventory and restock the minibar. So you vote, what would you do? And I see the votes are coming in. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So we'll get everybody comfortable with a fun one. So let's see what you said. All right. So who has a comment about this? Who says, yes, you've done something wrong? 83% of you. Why have you done anything wrong?
Michael?
Yes.
So someone wrote in the chat, it depends on the rules of the minibar. So the minibar says that I am allowed to replace any items taken, then I'm good. However, if the rule is once you take an item, you must pay for it, then replacing it with a cheaper cookie really is not ethical. That's why I voted yes, we did something wrong.
Thank you. But here's the whole thing. I got to tell you, rarely, I don't think ever, and you know, I used to travel almost every week around the world. I've never seen a minibar say, if you take something from this minibar, it's okay if you replace it with something exactly the same and cheaper. So I don't think that's gonna happen. But I will say this though, come on, it's $8 when you can find the exact same thing at $2.50. What's wrong with that?
Oh, Michael, if I may add that the whole concept of value is attached to time and place. And when that, and when that differs from circumstance to circumstance, you really have an item of a different value. So that's where the ethical part, I believe, comes in.
Yes. And I will say for those, you did save the pension fund money. You know, now you have saved the pensions fund, the hotel staff some work in inventory and restocking the minibar. But, you know, I would say, yeah, this is probably something that is unethical. On the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most unethical thing in the world, is it a 10? No. But it's important to understand that, you know, hotels do make money off of the merchandise, and they priced it as such. So, yeah. To replace it, probably is not the best thing to do. Yeah.
Mr. McMillan, not only that, but it's part of your overall home or in your own room. It prevents you from going outside and so forth. So it's a part of the whole service. It's not just the cost of the minibar itself.
Part of the overall service. Yes. I'd agree. I would agree.
Oh, sorry, Michael, a quick question. Don't know if you would, if you could, make a comment on the whole idea of conducting an action and truly having no knowledge as to whether or not your action borders on being ethical or not.
I'm not sure I understand.
I mean, taking an action and, for instance, that example you used, whether you would replace it, but you honestly didn't do it with a view that you were doing something wrong.
Well, here's the whole point is that, and I talk a little bit about this later in the session, is that we really have a tendency to believe that we are more ethical than we really are. And so when you look at B, when you look at C and D, you are really rationalizing behavior that you probably know is not right, right? This is my issue here is B, C, and D really represents rationalizations. Oh yeah, we're saving the pension fund money, so what I'm doing is okay. Or, oh, at least the ones I'm putting back are free. You know, since there is no sign on the minibar that says it's okay if you use these and replace them with something cheaper, you know at the time that you're buying these cheaper ones at the store that what you're doing is probably not right.
Okay, but one question.
Yes.
Isn't it unethical to eat an $8 cookie paid by the pension funds? And aren't you better to leave it there, go to the store, buy a bunch of cookies for $1, and then you're good, right?
Yes, but it's 1 a.m. in the morning. That's the problem. And you're hungry. You just got off the flight. So, you know.
So there's certain conditions applying, right?
We could talk about this all day, enjoyably, but I'm going to move on if you don't mind. All right. Okay, so here's some key points I want to bring to your attention. We make most of our decisions instantly and instinctively rather than rationally and using reasons. So we're just instantly going to get those cookies and we'll go to the store and buy them without really thinking about what we are doing. We all tend to believe that we are more ethical than we really are. And lastly, we often make unethical decisions not because we are bad people, but because we're often affected by psychological biases, social and organizational factors, and situational influences that affect how we make decisions. So some of these factors, obedience to authority. You know, we teach our kids from a young age, obey your elders, right? So if our boss asks us to do something, sometimes we'll do it without really thinking about what are the underlying ethical issues surrounding what we're being asked to do. Conformity bias, we all have a tendency to follow the crowd and to conform our behavior to that of their peers. So if you see everybody else, or if you know your other trustee colleagues are eating food from the minibar and replacing it, you'll think, well, if they're doing it, I can do it too, without, again, thinking about what the ethical issues are of what you're doing. Incrementalism, it's that gradual shift towards unethical behavior. You know, from an embezzlement or fraud perspective, no one wakes up one day and says, oh, I want to steal $25 million. It generally starts very small and then grows and grows. And this last one, which can be very, very dangerous, is this whole concept of overconfidence. We feel that I'm more ethical than they are. It won't happen to me. And this can be very, very dangerous. So anyway, these are just some of the factors that can lead even good people to make unethical decisions. All right? So let's see. Here's our next situation. All right, let's go back. You and two other pension, and again, some of these may apply, but it's the general concept that we want to talk about. You and two other pension trustees traveled to a foreign country to investigate investment managers for your fund. You're doing your due diligence. So the chief investment officer of a large investment company that you visit and a potentially attractive investment manager gives all of you very expensive gifts. Now, refusing the gifts would be considered an insult in this country and harm the good relations that you've developed with the firm's management. So, accepting the gift is A, okay, because refusal in this instance would jeopardize an investment opportunity for your pension fund. B, probably okay if you give the gifts to charity. C, probably not okay unless you tell the other trustees that you accepted the gifts. Or D, it's just not okay. Anybody have an idea of what the expensive gift should be?
Sorry, Mike, before they chip in, I realize Alicia Sylvester has her hands up. So
oh, sure. Yes.
Make a comment and then you can just re-engage on this question.
Okay.
Alicia, hello? Go ahead, please.
Hi, Miller. No, apparently that was up from before, but Michael addressed it. It was something in this discussion with Magdalena.
Yeah.
And addressed the question.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
So I'm just recognizing you, acknowledging you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Back over to you, Mike.
All right, so let's see, how are people voting here? All right. All right. Okay, so let me ask you, again, no right or wrong answer, and I will say sometimes gift giving in some countries is really not a form of bribery. It's just a form of establishing a friendship or a business relationship. So why is it not okay? %81 of you said it was not okay. Why is that?
Rachel, go ahead, please. Rachel Marshall.
Okay. Well, I think it's not okay because on some level it influences you, even if it's just unconscious, and not because something is okay in one location and it's not okay, and not because something is okay in one location but not okay in the other location, just okay over. That's
okay. I agree with that. Now, I see 20% of people said probably not okay unless you tell the other trustees that you accepted the gifts. I kind of get that. Who said C?
I said C.
Good.
Because what matters is that my fellow trustees know that in the decisions I take concerning the thing, it is not in any way created my being bought off.
Okay, okay.
I'm able to be a courteous guest and not offend people who did not intend to bribe in the first place.
Okay, I totally get that. I totally get that. So let me ask you this. Suppose if you and the rest of the board decides to hire this money manager, decides to hire the money manager because you've done your due diligence and everything else, okay? So let's suppose a month later, 2 months later, some of your plan's participants or beneficiaries find out that this manager who you just hired gave you and other trustees a very expensive gift. How do you think they are going to feel?
Well, it comes to conscience. At the end of the day, if I know that my decision was not based on the, then I'm okay. It's for them to create whatever impression they want to create.
But how will you be able to convince them that the only reason that you chose this manager not because of the expensive gift, but because of the performance of this manager?
You said before that I had already chosen the person before the gift.
No. You thought it was an attractive investment opportunity, but you had not chosen that manager before you got the gift. See, it says a potentially attractive investment manager.
Again, it comes down to my conscience.
Yes. Okay, so I agree with you. I understand that, and I'm not arguing. But I do want to say that right now, we are living in a world where perceptions can be as damning, if not reality. And so no matter what your conscience says, you participants and beneficiaries are going to believe that the only reason why you selected that manager is because they gave you that expensive gift. And that is really going to create a certain level of distrust or a certain level of skepticism towards you and the other trustees as a result of that.
I can only quote a great man here.
Yes.
There was no quid pro quo.
Yeah, but it appears that there is. It really does appear that there is. Yes, there appears that there is. And I do have to say that as trustees, you really do have to think about how is this action or this decision going to be perceived by the stakeholders who have elected me or who have selected me, etc. So there's no law or rule, but I think that's something that you should really think about.
Just to refer you to that one line, refusing the gifts would be considered an insult.
Yes. Yes, and so what you can, no. And what you can do is to explain to them, thank you very much, but my pension plan has a policy that limits the value of the gift I'm able to receive to XYZ dollars or so. So
if that is true, I could go that route.
Yes.
Ask me to make up a policy.
Yes. And so does your pension plan have a gift policy?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, so if an investment manager wants to give you a Rolex watch, you can take that Rolex watch.
Are they giving it to all trustees?
Let's suppose they are giving it to all trustees.
In all their pension funds.
Maybe not all of the pension funds, but just to your pension fund in order to get your business.
My pension fund manager.
Yes. All right. Anybody else have any questions?
Sylvia Mitchell and AAR want to come in. Sylvia, go ahead, and then we can AAR, whoever that is.
Yes, but it was already answered because I would say the only way that you could accept is if your code of ethics had a predefined level of acceptance of the value of the gift.
Right.
Because otherwise you put yourself in a very bad position.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Okay, so let's suppose And if you could mute yourself, let's suppose the president of Jamaica awards a huge construction contract, a $10 billion construction contract to this construction company. And you find out later that this construction company had given the president of Jamaica all of these expensive gifts. Wouldn't you be suspicious that the only reason why that construction company got that contract is because of all of the expensive gifts they gave to the president? Am I right?
Yeah, but if you have a limit, then you would be able to receive a small gift and be gracious.
Yes, yes. And as a matter of fact, I will say for the CFA Institute, our policy states that you cannot accept any gift that could be reasonably expected to compromise your independence and objectivity. So rather than making it a dollar amount, we've made it a principle, because again, so much of ethics involves judgment and interpretation. So yes, a nominal gift, something less than $50 or whatever, yes. But again, remember perceptions. And so that's how you have to communicate it. All right. So yes.
Before you go, so I just a time check. I want us to pace ourselves to wrap in the next 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
There are a lot of raised and just want to give Way there and AAR a chance to come in, since they have not had a chance to make a contribution as yet. So Way there and AAR, can you just make your point? Way there. If Way there isn't ready, AAR, do you want to come in?
Yes, my name is Alexander Reed, Petrojan Pension Fund. Dr. Macmillan had effectively answered the question on my behalf. Exactly what he said is exactly what I had in mind, and I think is appropriate. There is no way. Remember, the action of any trustee is binding on all trustees. And if a gift of especially money of whatever sum is accepted, it would be difficult for the trustees to convince the member of the plan that didn't factor in their decision of awarding the contract to the fund manager that gave them that gift.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important that we think about how our action will be perceived and the consequences of the perception.
Yes.
So that's just my thing.
No, I agree. That is very, very much, very important. And I'm going to say 2 last things before we go. One are on the screen right now are 2 resources that we can provide to you free for trustees. One is a primer for investment trustees, which really focuses upon your roles and responsibilities. And the other one is our pension trustee code of ethics, which talks about your fiduciary responsibility, conflicts of interest, and duties as such. So both of those we can make available to you. They're free on our website and are downloadable in our on our website. And also I want to just say that, I'll go back. I want to say that I'd like this to be, and I think Hugh and CFA Society Jamaica would agree, that this is just going to be hopefully the first workshop in a series of workshops that we can collaborate with you on in providing you with the type of training and education that will enable you to be much more effective and comfortable in your role as trustees. So I thank you all very much for your comments and questions. And as I said when I started, hopefully the next session I can do in person as opposed to virtually. So Hugh, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can have the final comments. Also, I'll stay for the next session after the break.
Okay, that's great. And let me just say, Mike, you just want to officially indicate that we have adopted you as an honorary Jamaican.
Oh yeah.
Because it goes without saying that we have embarked on a long-term partnership. Just in terms of the considerations that it took us through today, very rich, very thought-provoking. Some of the issues are in black and white, but I think what you have done, you have teased out some of the issues. So the trustees have a good sense for what are some of the considerations that they need to take into account based on their significant fiduciary duty. So I just want to say on behalf of all the participants, 170 something participants, we certainly appreciate in terms of just in taking us through and having an engaging discussion. I always like the interactive type of workshops. And so we just want to thank you. And we're actually happy that you'll be able to stay for the second segment, which begins 11 to 12.
Can I say one more thing? There's a feedback survey on your phone that's anonymous. So if you could just fill out that survey, which I've turned on, so that we can make the remaining, any future sessions as effective or more effective than the current one, please do provide us with your feedback. So.
Certainly, and we will, similar to what we did last year, we will have the presentation as well as the resource material sent to you via email. It's a lot to digest. I also just want to acknowledge in terms of Pension Industry Association of Jamaica, they are the ones who partnered with us in putting on this workshop. You heard from Sunny a little earlier. You'll hear her in a full somewhere between 11 and 12, but we also thank her and her organization for the role in terms of just putting this together. So what I'm going to suggest is that we take a 15-minute stretch break. We don't need to log out. Those are coffee drinkers. You can go and have your latte now. And so that we can begin promptly, let's say 11:05, and we'll end at 12. So I just ask everybody, don't log out. Just mute your microphone. You can go and have your stretch break, clear whatever email there is. Need to be cleared. And then when we come back, it's going to be very interesting because the session that's coming up, you'll hear about your trustee duties of hiding concern to the regulator, Cornelia Apopek. She'll be on. Frequent complaints from trustees, as well as proposed solutions, and then lessons learned from court decisions, as well as COVID-19. What will be interesting about this session that's coming up, Cornelia will speak for 20 minutes, so then there'll be 40 minutes to allow questions and robust discussion. So we have learned from last year, the feedback we got last year, trustees said that there are a lot of questions that they wanted to answer, and the 25 minutes wasn't enough. So we're carving out 40 minutes this time for you to come with all your questions. So we're going to pause right here, and we will resume at 11:05. So just go and get your stretch break, your coffee, whatever it is. But please don't sign out, so at least you won't have any technical issues logging back in. So thank you for the morning session, and we reconvene at 11:05.
Hi, Annalisa. It's me calling you here on the program. I see you're working hard.
Sorry?
I see you're working hard.
Yes, I'm trying.
Enjoy. All
How are
right.
you?
I'm fine. Are you a member of PFAJ?
I am a member of the NC National Water Commission Pension Board.
Oh, that means you are a member of the Superannuation Fund.
Right.
Trustees.
Right.
Okay, one day we must talk because there's a, what I'm realizing is that, as I said in my feedback comments, is that a lot of the trustees are not ensuring that the rules of the law, when it comes to calculating what your benefit is,
right,
being followed. The law clearly says today in the Income Tax Amendment Act,
yes,
6.5 years of membership gives you 75%. And if it's 75% of remuneration, not of basic pay.
Oh.
So what has happened is that you have the pensions fund. Sorry, I'm Magdalena. I think you recognize.
Yeah, man, I saw it. Yeah, I'm seeing.
What I recognize is, while the presenter who came on just now was very good, I like him, there are little basic things in Jamaica that we as practitioners don't know and don't follow.
Right. And what is interesting as well is that when it is that we have investment managers that we rely on to do these calculations, you're correct. We may rely on their calculations to our detriment if it is that the right formula is not applied.
Right, and that is because, in my humble opinion, I've been in this business since 1985, so a lot of the issues. But what I have found is that the trustees themselves don't take an active,
hands-on approach,
focused approach on the laws of the land.
Yes.
You come and tell them, they say, yeah, it's nice. It's not realizing if what the person says to them doesn't comply with the law, because at the end of the day, that's what it's for, to provide 75% of your remuneration. Go and read the Income Tax Amendment Act.
Yes. We'll definitely be doing that and raising those concerns, especially even with our investment fund managers, because they ought to know.
Yeah, but not only that.
It's our responsibility, actually.
Yes, but you also need to speak to the administrator.
Yes.
Administrator.
Yeah.
How are the funds being calculated? Is there just an actual formula? What is it?
Yes.
And another thing is, and forgive me for being so pedantic about this.
No, man, it's fine.
A lot of the funds in Jamaica are incorrectly named. Most of them do not have in their name XYZ Company Superannuation Fund. And that to me is. And what has happened is that when I now meet those people, I say to them, they come to me and they say, okay, Magda, can you help me with claiming my pension benefits? I said, well, I can't help you until you tell me what it is. What is it? I mean, I know. I think and they go on and on. They cannot say the word superannuation fund. But my clients that I have know the word superannuation fund, and it flows. I cannot say, these are the little things.
Yes. That are overlooked and ought not to be overlooked.
Right. They ought not to be overlooked, because when you understand that, you get a better industry, retirees, because you're coming to knock back on your door. You see what I'm saying? Anyway, I am just very passionate about these things.
No, man. And that is what we need.
And I want to see the industry change.
Yes.
Up in the era between 1985 to 2003, 2004, saying group pension plan or group pension scheme. Now we change the pension plan. No, it's either superannuation fund or retirement scheme. What is the law for each?
Okay. Yes.
I'm trying to get trustees as well to change the names of their plans and put on the cover superannuation fund, or when retirement scheme didn't have a problem.
Yes.
But put on the cover superannuation fund. XYZ company, superannuation fund.
Right.
Whether it's a DB or DC. So once it's on the cover, then if the plan member, based on the law, asks you for a copy of the trust and rules, it's on the cover. You don't have to go to
Right.
it. No, anyway.
Yeah, I will definitely look into this.
Yes, please do. Good to see you on.
Yes.
I thought I'd be polite and let you see how I look at age 69. So I'll just come off now.
No, don't tell nobody about your age. That you don't look it at all. Don't quote that at all.
I am having fun working in the pensions industry because that's what's keeping me young.
You might have to walk with the age paper to prove your age.
I think I'll take you up on that point.
Yes, yes, walk with it.
Enjoy being a trustee.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, good morning again. I presume everybody has had their stretch break and ready to go. I think it's a yes. We have some new
Yes.
trustees who will be joining us.
Yes, ready to go.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so without any further ado, I want to introduce Cornelia or Apapek. Cornelia is the Senior Director for Pensions at FSC. I presume most of you know her and you have had a very cordial relationship. So let me just give you a little on her in terms of a brief bio. So she was appointed as the Senior Director of Pensions at FSC in October 2018 to oversee the execution of FSC's mandate to regulate and supervise the pensions industry. Prior to her tenure at FSC, she was actually in private sector where she held the post of Senior Manager of Pension Administration at Proven Fund Managers Limited. Also, prior to that, she was the pensions manager at First Global Financial Services Limited, which is formerly a member of Grace Kennedy Group. Cornelia comes to us with a little over 15 years of experience in the field of pension admin. She has a BSc in Public Administration and International Relations, as well as she has her master's with the University of New Orleans. Just to show that she has a softer side to her, she's also a member of Beta Gamma Sigma Society, that's a business honor society, and she's definitely has a soft side because she is dedicated to her family, and in her spare time she enjoys quality time with her precious family. She also likes playing kaluki as well as traveling throughout Jamaica and beyond because of course FSC guys are well paid, so she can afford to travel globally. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to Cornelia, who will take us through a 20-minute presentation, and then for the last 40 minutes, we will bring on board Sanya Goff, who is the president of PIAJ, as well as Mary James, who is the director of PIAJ. And that 40 minutes will be a robust Q&A session. So Cornelia, over to you. Welcome. And okay.
Thank you for having me. I really wanted to start with saying good morning. I thought the presentation delivered by Mr. Macmillan was an excellent one as usual. And I wanted to just let you know, of course, you're welcome. And I wanted to let you know that I'm really excited about the opportunity to present to our stakeholders, which are one of our, our most valuable set of stakeholders. And I want to also thank the members of the CFA Society Jamaica and the PIAJ for facilitating this discourse. Today, we will highlight the role of pension plan trustees, discuss the areas of concern for management and oversight of pension plans, how to avoid common pitfalls. We will also introduce you to FSC's application of the exciting new world of risk-based supervision. And I'm hoping everyone is able to see my screen. Am I correct in that?
Yes, we're seeing it.
Great. Now, where the Board of Trustees employs a strong governance structure, generally pension plans proportionately benefit from better performance. The obligation to make decisions remains with the trustees, albeit decisions should be informed by having regard to advice given from agents. The FSC has observed in some instances, trustees wanting their agents to represent them at trustees meetings in their absence, and we should note that this is not permitted. Additionally, while the sponsor trustees are appointed by the sponsor, they have the same fiduciary duty to the plan as all other classes of trustees. We note that many pension plans fail to appoint a pensioner trustee. Once there are 30 or more pensioners or deferred pensioners, a pensioner trustee must be duly appointed. However, insufficient tracking of pensioners and deferred pensioners often make it difficult to convene a meeting to nominate and elect pensioner trustees. In addition to that, given the times that we're now in where we are impacted by COVID-19, physical meetings are often not practical, and as such, trustees must employ suitable methods to convene meetings where they are needed. Areas of concern include untimely and incomplete and inaccurate submission of statutory reports. This can be rectified through establishing a schedule of delivery of reports from the fund managers, which allows time for trustees to review and make queries before submission to the FSC. Another failure to monitor the remittance of contributions. Trustees should hold the sponsor accountable to ensure that they meet their obligations. Another issue is the inadequate review and oversight of investment portfolios. This often is resulting from the lack of training or, where possible, appointing trustees with suitable skill sets in order to adequately review and understand the investment portfolios. We also note instances where there is lack of formal contractual arrangements between trustees and fund managers, and this can be problematic. Additionally, failure to review agents' performance, management reports, and policies can result in underperformance. For amendments, we remind trustees to ensure that proposed changes comply with legislative requirements and the plan's constitutive documents. It is important that suitable administrative, legal, and actuarial advice be obtained to guide the process. Ensure a checklist is employed in confirming that all required documents are duly executed and submitted. Trustees are also to ensure that all relevant participants are notified and explanations provided are sufficient, clear, and consistent with the proposed amendments. Oftentimes, one of the main challenges we have at the FSC is the fact that you have one set of proposed amendments and an entirely different thing that is explained to members. Thereby, we can only assume that members are not actually approving what is being put forward to the FSC as the proposed amendment. For wind-ups and surplus distributions, trustees must ensure that all information is accurate and submitted in a timely manner. The process must be consistent with the trust deed and rules and the legislation. Where the trustees waive the right for the required notice period for a wind-up, the members should be advised. They should also be aware of any implications this may have for their member benefits. We have observed in a number of instances inadequate communication with members, particularly related to benefit statements and payments. Members are entitled to information, and it is important that they receive same. Additionally, the FSC has observed that funds which hold frequent member meetings have more engaged participants and improved governance. And we already noted that improved governance often leads to improved performance for the fund. Note that the FSC has provided on its website a comprehensive set of bulletins and guidelines to assist trustees in executing their duties in relation to all the aforementioned matters. And should further clarification be required, the FSC will be willing to provide assistance. To reduce complaints regarding member benefits, we encourage trustees to have frequent dialogue with administrators or actuaries to gain a better understanding of the benefits provided by the plan. It's difficult for you to manage and explain what you don't know or truly understand. We want you to put in place systems to ensure timely payment of contributions, which could include agreeing with the sponsor that interest should apply for late payments or outstanding contributions. Additionally, We should be ensuring contributions are reconciled and anomalies are reported to trustees. It is very important that the reports provided to trustees are comprehensive enough to provide them with all the information they need in order to effectively execute their role. To reduce member concerns regarding credited interest, trustees should ask probing questions about investment reports and strategies to ensure that returns are maximized. Challenge the rationale and accuracy of fees and interest applied to member contributions. You ought to, it is your responsibility. Do your own research and also take guidance from other investment advisors. In my past, I must say that I have been privileged as an administrator to sit in meetings where trustees never hesitated to challenge administrators, challenge investment managers, challenge actuaries or any consultant that presented to them. And this was very valuable in ensuring that the fund performed. And this was something that I have grown to appreciate the value of. Oftentimes, trustees may have their own investment portfolios, or they may have a wide range of access to other investment advisors. It is important that you take the advice that you get from these other persons and utilize them to ensure that the fund is actually being managed appropriately. Where allowed, ensure the trustees approve or in other circumstances are notified of the rate of credited interest applied to members' accounts. Trustees should always be aware of the rates that are applied to members' accounts. And this must be consistent with the rules.
Arnita,
yes.
Sorry to interject. Just before you go on, there's a general question about whether the items you're taking us through, are they relative to superannuation funds, or are you referring to both superann funds and retirement schemes?
Okay, in most instances, they are relevant to both, but in some instances, they're relevant to one or the other. But you'll note the general theme speaks to the overall responsibility of trustees. Trustees, regardless of the nature of the fund that they manage, are responsible for ensuring that adequate governance is in place, proper reports are provided to them, and regardless of whether this is a retirement scheme or a superannuation fund, trustees are still held accountable for the fund and must ask probing questions. So even where you are a trustee for a fund, that for a retirement scheme, you ought to be asking probing questions. It is very important that you do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, we have, yeah, sorry. I got thrown off a bit there. Now, to reduce complaints with regards to benefit payments, we want trustees to ensure that service standards and procedures are established and communicated to members and sponsors with regards to benefit payments. It's hard to critique something that you don't understand or when you don't know how it should operate. Where there are delays in benefit payments, encourage members to communicate this to trustees. Additionally, where a service provider is having a challenge in terms of making a benefit payment, they should be actively communicating that to the trustees and the member to ensure that the member is truly appraised of what is happening. It is important that we maintain a schedule of persons due to retire in the short term, and this may be for, say, a year. It may be longer depending on the needs of the pension fund. This will allow trustees to be able to guide and provide members with suitable advice and education about retirement as they embark on this process. We also want you to maintain a schedule of benefits payable, and this should include unclaimed benefits. Trustees should ensure that routine and practical efforts are being made for these beneficiaries or their next of kin to be contacted. We now live in an age of social media. It is important to utilize those avenues to contact persons. It is also important to touch base with other long-standing employees that may still maintain contact with past employees and may be able to close the gap in some of these instances. From time to time, we have sponsors who undertake to establish a new superannuation fund for their employees or create a new fund with alternate benefit arrangements. We encourage you to ensure that the features of the fund are consistent with the financial capacity of the fund and its members. Avoid the often used approach of one-size-fits-all trust deed and rules. If you are concerned that members may not be able to consistently meet the typical payment of 5% compulsory contributions, consider a lower compulsory contribution rate in favor of a higher voluntary contribution rate. This may also be applied to the sponsor. That way, should the sponsor encounter any difficulties, they are able to continue the pension plan and meet the obligations without any undue stress on the organization. At the end of the day, pension fund is a benefit. Even though it is a responsibility of the sponsor and the trustees to meet certain obligations, it should not provide undue strain to them. Carefully ensure wind-up provisions are consistent with the Pensions Act and the use of surplus is clearly laid out as currently desired and possibly anticipated. Oftentimes, we see trustees trying to amend rules to make changes to how surplus ought to be utilized when there have been certain amendment fetters that are included to prevent this. Note that any limitation placed on assigning surplus on wind-up to members based on the Income Tax Act's maximum pension limit should be carefully worded. The maximum pension limit applies on retirement to benefits payable at retirement and not necessarily on wind-up. Ensure amendment fetters are carefully constructed so that they do not constrain trustees in executing their duties in the future. The FSC has embarked on risk-based supervision. And so we want to again introduce you to it and provide you with some additional information on what this means for you. Risk-based supervision is in line with international best practice standards adopted around the world through the International Organization of Pension Supervisors. RBS focuses on identifying existing and developing risks faced by pension plans and fund managers. For example, a plan with a very high portion of its assets invested in equity, particularly given the current and expected market volatility, will have a heightened inherent market risk. We will assess the quality of the operational and governance practices in place to manage these risks. Following on our previous example, this will incorporate an examination of how often trustees review the investment strategy and the portfolio performance, as well as the adequacy of research done to support investment decisions. It is fundamentally a forward-looking assessment that takes into account emerging trends and vulnerabilities in the economy, the industry, as well as the entity itself. This allows the FSC to take preemptive steps to promote the health of the pension sector. RBS will see the FSC focusing on risk rather than primarily compliance. We will not, however, do away with compliance. However, our focus will be on the materiality of the risk in terms of how our assessments are done. We will be utilizing sound judgment in executing this function. So for example, if the sponsor had paid in contributions late on one occasion and they paid it in a day or two late, This may not be something, while it is not compliant with the regulations, this may not be something that the FSC may place significant attention to once it does not have any material impact on the fund. We will, however, expect trustees to obey the laws and ensure that they are compliant. RBS will focus also on systematic risks. So we will not only be assessing pension funds in a vacuum, but we will also be assessing pension funds and pension funds industries as well as related industries in its entirety to assess whether or not there are systematic risks or likely vulnerabilities that are likely to materialize in risk to pension funds. RBS will reduce the regulatory burden on well-managed institutions and pension plans. Where there are no major concerns identified with an institution and the governance of plans, it is likely we will reduce the frequency of examination of those entities. So if you want to see the FSC spend less time examining your fund, ensure your fund is in good order. Alternatively, we will undertake more frequent examinations of entities that routinely fail to address areas of material risk or have very high or exceptional risk exposures. RBS will also see us focus on systematic risks and allow us to prioritize supervisions of areas of significant problems. Rather than examining a plan simply in its entirety, we will assess the industry. If we realize, for example, that credit risk may become an issue, then we will undertake to do a targeted assessment in relation to credit risk for multiple portfolios. The FSC is implementing a phased rollout of RBS, which is expected to be completed in 2021. Until then, we will focus on the development of the supervisory framework and assessment tools, including revamped reporting forms. We have thus far completed 4 pilot examinations of varying institutions and are in the process of conducting more. In anticipation of the implementation of the RBS framework, the FSC has published a bulletin on the minimum requirements for establishing a suitable risk management framework for trustees. We do recognize that not all pension funds are the same or have the same needs, and as such, we expect the risk framework to be respective in relation to the actual pension fund for which it is established. It includes a sample risk register that addresses common problems that are faced by trustees. We wanted to ensure that we gave trustees a practical tool that can be utilized by them in assessing risk as well as managing those risks. Trustees should establish their goals and objectives for the plan, then undertake a risk assessment to identify the risks that may cause failure to meet those objectives. Account should also be taken of the likelihood of a key risk materializing, the potential impact of that risk, and how that risk may be mitigated. To ensure we have a smooth transition, the FSC will be undertaking to improve its public education efforts, and that's part of the reason why we are here today. We will also undertake to consult with industry as the framework develops, including the development of reporting forms. We would not be able to complete this presentation without touching on concerns surrounding the impact of COVID-19. We encourage trustees to keep abreast of environmental changes caused by the pandemic and its impact on the pension plan. It is important to reassess assumptions made in taking critical decisions to ensure that they are still relevant. Assess the solvency level of the plan, and if the plan is insolvent or marginally solvent, trustees should develop strategies to maintain or gain solvency. This should incorporate stress and sensitivity testing in actuarial assessments and investment portfolios. Assess the impact on the fund where applicable, and for example, take note of the required employer contribution rate. You should take note if there is a variation in the expected performance of the fund, how it will impact the employer contribution rate. And this is something we encourage all trustees to ensure is in their actuarial valuations. For defined benefit plans, you should always know how much more employer contributions will be needed to fund the plan if there is a variation in the yield of the fund. Do you know how much more the employer will have to contribute if there's a 1% less yield for the fund? For defined contribution plans, do members know how much their expected retirement benefit will be affected if there is a 1% variation in the credited interest over the long term? Oftentimes, pension statements will say what the expected benefit will be at retirement if certain conditions are met. Should this be enhanced? Should you say to a member, if there is a variation in the expected rate of interest of the fund, say for example by 4% over the long term, how will this affect the member's benefit? This will likely make the member more prepared for retirement. Trustees should continue to monitor business continuity plans to ensure that contributions are paid to the plan or suitable arrangements are made where payments are delayed or outstanding. Trustees should also ensure that benefits are paid to members and reports are submitted in a timely manner. They should also ensure that they keep abreast of market activities. Knowledge is key in making the right decisions. Most importantly, we ask that you stay connected to the FSC for updates, guidelines, and information that are relevant to you. It has been a pleasure presenting to you, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the team of the Pensions Division at the FSC who put together the presentation, in particular, Alicia and Stephanie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Cornelia.
Oh, thank you, Cornelia. Cornelia?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you. It's raining
You're
cats
most welcome.
where I am, so I'm just trying to find a quiet space. Okay, so while Cornelia catches her breath, we're just gonna introduce Sania Goff. Sania is the president of PIAJ, formerly PFAJ, excuse me, as well as Mary James, who is a director for PIAJ, just to unmute. And then we're just going to open up for Q&A. Cornelia would have touched on quite a bit. I know questions would have been raised about, as she made a general comments, whether she was referring to super and funds or approved retirement scheme. So for the next 40 minutes, we'll go until about 10:12, just respect everybody's time. So we're just gonna open the floor up now for questions. I'll just ask persons, since we have 177 persons, just raise your hands. We'll acknowledge you and you can just pose your question to Cornelia, Sania, or Marie James. So the floor is open. Welcome, Sania. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you, Hugh.
Marie?
Hi, morning, everyone.
Okay, morning, Marie. So the floor is open, trustees. Okay, Sylvia Mitchell has a question. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Since no one else is speaking yet, there was a question earlier about what do we do with investments re-COVID. And I was thinking two areas that would help is if the funds are in lots of different areas, And also because they're long term, so there's no rush to do much different and let everything settle down. Is there any guidance in this area?
And Sylvia, do you want to direct the question to anybody in particular? Cornelia, Sanya, or Marie?
Anyone will do.
Yes, there is guidance. One of the issues related to COVID is that so much about it is unprecedented. So it is hard to say exactly how best to deal with it. But there are certain approaches that can be taken. One of which, of course, again, is ensuring that you are adequately informed about the issues. If you pointed out quite correctly, if there is no rush to cash in assets, and concretize the losses that would have been faced by the industry since March, thereabout, and even prior to that, then you should ensure that you review your strategy with a view that this is a long-term arrangement and make adequate decisions. Also, you may want to provide guidance to members in relation to how they go about handling their benefit payments, because as benefit payments are made, then these will also result in you concretizing again the losses that may have been experienced by the fund. Diversification is also an important strategy, but one of the things I've always firmly believed in is every single instance of a challenge presents an opportunity. We now have an opportunity to get suitable stocks, suitable assets at lower prices, and where you have assessed an investment opportunity as a good one, then you should seek opportunities to rebalance your portfolio accordingly, take advantage of the depressed prices for future gain.
Can I ask a question there, following up on what?
Thank you.
Can I make a comment based on what Cornelia? It's good to see Cornelia presenting. I don't know, but why do we present these plans as the be-all and end-all? I don't know if the initial presenter would agree with me. I don't know if he's still on or not. But I think we have a problem in that if we talk about superannuation funds, they're in the children of superannuation funds. We don't make the member realize that his benefits of superannuation fund is one of many. So you have NIS, you have NHT, you have the superannuation funds, you have retirement. So if we could present to each plan member a holistic view, or as it's called in the industry, coordination of benefits, then you find that when one goes down, the other one is up. Because, like for instance, NIS is a DB type plan, but you might be in a DC or DC type superannuation fund. And I really, I suppose because I'm getting old as well, I'm really, really dying to see the industry speak in a more holistic manner, but yet still be specific. We can't keep talking about only 10% of the people in a plan, and a lot of people are in NIS and NHT, and we don't get an interview. I think we have to be a little bit more holistic in how we look at retirement, financial lifestyle planning in Jamaica, based on all the plans available in Jamaica by law, and therefore how we guide people through. That has been my issue there with the way the presentations are going. I can't manage just a tunnel vision of one only. I have to see how it connects with what is there. I don't know what you all think.
Magdalena, I'd say that I think there definitely is space for a discussion around Social Security benefits and Social Security reform, because oftentimes we ignore the NIS, which is our Social Security scheme in Jamaica, which only has as part of its benefit package a pension arrangement or pension benefits. The fact is that it has many other benefits and components to it. I think oftentimes the FSC is the regulator of private sector pensions, so they wouldn't have they wouldn't be involved in a discussion around NIS and PIHA as well. Our focus is really lobbying for private sector pension reform. So that's why conversations like these are tailored to a discussion around private sector pensions. But you are correct. When we consider retirement planning and security for our pensioners, in their retirement years, somebody's phone needs to go on mute. The security for our pensioners in retirement years. Yes, I agree. The conversation needs to be about NHT, NHF, NIS, your private personal savings, the three-pillar system, your retirement scheme contributions, or your superannuation benefits. So you're correct. I think there is scope and room for ensuring that there is conversation around social security reform and what the social security benefit structure looks like. Because too often we talk about your private sector pension coverage without recognizing that there are other elements towards overall social security protection in retirement.
Yes, and I want to make one last comment there, and that is we talk about retirement only in the context of old age, and that for me is very sad. We need to start speaking to retirement as it's laid out in the Income Tax Act 955 and all the other legislation in terms of disability, old age, and death. I sing that song every day, and I'm not hearing it coming out at all from any of the presenters. When we go on the media, they're only talking about old age. And to me, that just bothers me, because I've had clients who've collected millions of dollars in old age from NHT, from NIS, from wherever. And it's like, we're not gathering the data, we're not presenting it holistically, so we're making people feel it's only one area. I agree with you, this is a private sector organization, but I also agree, I also would hope that with time, as you rightly said, it would broaden to include a more holistic point of view. But please, I beg all you, disability, old age, and death are dying to have that rang out on every platform, every meeting, because people don't know that those are the times when the law says you are entitled to a benefit. There might be other benefits, like with NIS has a lot of other benefits, but those are 3 times when both a superannuation fund and retirement schemes pay a benefit.
Okay, noted, Magdalena, and we'll certainly take that into account. We want to just spread the love. There are a number of other persons who have want to make a comment, or there's a question from Charmaine Rankin directed to Cornelia in terms of what is the time frame? What time frame is FSC giving the Board of Trustees to develop their risk management framework?
The time frame is the time frame is as soon as possible. We recognize that trustees may have resource challenges, particularly in this time. However, the sooner you begin to develop this risk management framework, the better. Let us not focus on the timeline that is established by the regulators, but rather the need for urgency in establishing a risk management framework that undoubtedly persons would have seen the importance of, particularly now. Trustees should have been planning for, if I have a particular targeted return and it is not met, what then? If there is a crisis event such as the one we're currently in, how do we handle it? If for any reason the sponsor is unable to make contributions, say for example, there are a number of persons being laid off or companies closing operations, how do we treat with a situation like that? Because that may have liquidity considerations. So what I would like to say to Charmaine and to everyone essentially is that the time frame to do it is now, if it has not yet been done.
Okay, thanks for that, Cornelia. Lance, you want to go ahead with your question?
Yes, good afternoon again. Good day. This question is directed to Cornelia. It is a well-known fact that it takes a while for the processing through the FSC for documents, especially during a winding up process. Some persons talk about 2 to 3 years. Is there a plan to shorten this time frame? Is it a lack of resources, or is there anything that can be done? Because this seems to be unacceptable by members.
Thank you. That's a very excellent question, and I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to address it. the FSC does not under any way, shape or form take a year or 2 years to review wind-up documents. The only instance where that where a set of wind-up documents may take that long to be approved is an instance where there's incomplete submissions. The submissions have been reviewed and found to be inadequate, and a letter was sent to the trustees requesting further information or clarification, and we have not actually received a response from trustees. What the FSC will be doing, because we have a slew of these pension funds who have not been responsive to the SSC's queries, we will actually be engaging in a project to make contact with these trustees to have them forward the information that we need as soon as possible. And again, we do encourage persons, if you want to ensure that your application is reviewed in as timely a manner as possible, it is very important that you provide complete and accurate information.
Thank you.
Questions? I just put a question while person put their thoughts together. Last year, we had a robust discussion about phase 2 of the pension regs. So it'd be good if Sanya and or Marie just make a general comment in terms of how that is expected to change our lives once the regulations have been promulgated.
Well, I think the most pressing question that often comes up with phase 2 is when is it going to happen, which I think would be Cornelia might be able to best not answer that, because I'm not sure she even has much control over that process as really a facilitating stakeholder in the whole discussion. But there are a lot of anticipated changes around phase 2. I think one that has come up, one anticipated change that has become very relevant in today's discussion was around trustee training. I anticipate that we're going to see some level of mandatory requirements for trustees to be trained. Cornelia, you can confirm if that still is a part of the phase 2 discussions. And what that looks like. You know, is it that the FSC will roll out training courses, or will there be independent third-party providers that will be certified? And how many hours of training will be required, and how often? I certainly have always been a champion of trustee training. I don't believe, and I agree with our facilitator earlier, that it's necessary or even practical that all trustees have, knowledge in investments or actuarial science or law, or trust relationships in order to be able to serve effectively as a trustee. But certainly you need to have the majority of your board, I think, displaying that level of competence. And how that plays out in terms of being fit and proper and remaining fit and proper should be fleshed out in phase 2. I mean, to get into a discussion around what phase 2 will bring, I mean, many of the things we've heard about them time and time again. I think that I wonder, and maybe Cornelia can speak to this, the extent to which the recent guidelines that the FSC issued, not guidelines, sorry, discussion paper around fast tracking some of the phase 2 recommendations, for example, around hardship withdrawals. Is that going to somehow take us off track when it comes to the phase 2 timeline? And also, if you could speak, Cornelia, to the timing around the fast track legislation around hardship withdrawals and suspension of and contribution holidays. Cornelia?
Yes, sorry, I had muted myself and was responding to you while muted. All right, so I took some notes based on the comments that you made. First and foremost, in relation to the timeline for phase 2, yes, we have had some unforeseen delays. We are, though, very advanced in the process of phase 2 amendments. We have reviewed successive versions of the proposed bill, and we will continue to do that. Before you ask me, yes, we will make every effort to put forward a case to ensure there is industry consultation. And I should say there has been a lot of open reception to that. Yes, it has been somewhat delayed, particularly because of the COVID-19 issues. as it would have affected any and every other organization. I'll jump into the fast track amendments. Your question regarding whether or not it will further delay or derail the phase 2 amendments, there is the potential for that. There is always a potential for that. But really, the fast track amendments, pretty much everything that was in the fast track amendments with minor edits in relation to adapting it to consider pandemics of this nature was already in the phase 2 amendment. So we don't anticipate that it should significantly derail it.
Okay.
What we may see happening is that the phase 2 process may have to take place over phases. The bills, the regulations, as you know, it has been many years in the making, and as such, the revisions, the amendments are very extensive. And as such, what we may have to do is alter our intended approach to delivering the phase 2 package to industry to ensure that it is an effective way of delivery to industry for consultation. In relation to trustee training, we do not have a mandatory, as at today, we do not have mandatory training proposed. And this is in response not to say that we don't believe that it is important, but just simply in response to the practical nature of the environment in which we operate. It would be a failure on the part of the FSC to mandate something that may not be practically employed. What we are instead doing at this time is we are actually working on a project as we speak to build out the training facility provided to trustees. So we are in the process of creating what is called a trustee handbook that would provide guidance on all areas of the duties of trustees, as well as issues that trustees are likely to deal with, including legislation, all manner of issues that that trustees are likely to encounter in carrying out their duties. One of the things we want to do is see where there are opportunities to create a framework for that handbook, not just to hand somebody a very comprehensive book that they're not likely to read, but rather to automate the handbook so that persons can easily digest the information and even possibly do assessments after reviewing the handbook so they can be graded in terms of their level of understanding. So these are things that the FSC is rolling out in addition to the intention to continue to do additional workshops, continue to provide training to ensure that a good framework is available for trustees to access suitable training.
The only thing I'd say, Cornelia, to that, and I would love to hear what the participants, a general feel of
Make a list of the things we need to look about tomorrow. Put that down as well. You're going to need that before you go and get the vehicle passed.
Okay, sorry, that wasn't.
Hugh, you've muted. Okay.
Okay, so Cornelia, thanks for that, because I know this has been an ongoing conversation, and certainly the last time I'd left it, I thought that the FSC was aligned on the need for training, because the truth is, at these workshops and the luncheons and the seminars, it's the same trustees that you see time and time again, the trustees who are already seized of the importance of training. And so we're talking, and if there isn't a requirement and a need to be trained, you're not going to have those outliers taking up the training obligation, training responsibility. Even with a handbook, no matter how interactive it may be, and even with self-testing at the end of it, etc., which I think are all great ideas, you still are relying on the initiative of the individual trustees to get it done. I think that what too often when we hear and when you see some of the issues that come to you, and I'm sure many times you're surprised at the nature of the decisions or the types of decisions that the trustees felt were appropriate to be made. And you realize the extent to which they're not availing themselves of proper advice, and there is a significant, deficit when it comes to knowledge and understanding of basic principles. I mean, you are hard pressed to find a board of trustees where every single trustee has read the deed and rules and actually knows what it says, knows what it means, and can confirm that it is consistent with how they actually operate and exercise their duties, execute their duties. And so I would love to hear how the other participants feel about it, because I think there is room for ensuring that trustee training is in place, is a requirement, without making it so burdensome as to dissuade a trustee from wanting to continue to serve. But there are so many opportunities to certify third-party training providers, because a lot of investment managers already provide it. Some of them provide it as part of their fee structure anyway, and so it can actually, you know, merge easily into existing frameworks that are there. But I am a little concerned if I think there's room for looking at that, because I've said it oftentimes. Many people on this call would have heard me say it in other fora, where we don't have a true fit and proper criteria. You know, in many cases it's proper, it's not about fit. And so I think we really need to look, even if we're not going to make it a mandatory requirement for the fitness element to be satisfied, at the very least we need to have a minimum standard or minimum level of ongoing training. Professions across the world are required to do that to maintain certification. And I think we can look at how burdensome we make it and to ensure that it's not too arduous, but I wouldn't want to just leave it to the initiative of the trustees.
Thank you, Madeline, before you go on. So I just want to, do a time check. We're on track to wrap up by 12:15. So Madeline and Lance, I've not forgotten you, but I just wanted to ask a question before we go further. And this question is actually coming from discussions we had earlier about the impact of COVID-19 on investment portfolios. It's an open secret that most of the portfolio values are down probably 20-25%. So I want to ask Marie this question. Marie is the director of PIAJ, but her day job is as asset manager, and of course she liaises with the other asset managers in the industry. So my question to you, Marie, is this: what has been the general feedback from your colleagues in the industry in terms of how the trustees have been responding to seeing the asset values, portfolio values, you know, take that kind of sharp decline?
Thanks you. I was actually going to comment on the whole governance and monitoring of investment professionals, especially in this environment, particularly since Dr. Macmillan would have raised it as something that trustees should monitor on an ongoing basis. So you're correct that the market is kind of turbulent now. What we have seen as investment professionals with the response from trustees is generally mixed. There are some trustees that are more involved and make inquiries, want to see any stress testing on the portfolio, assuming a worst case or best case scenarios. Unfortunately, there are other trustees that are not so involved. It could be because pension funds are long-term in nature, or they have trusted their investment professionals so much that they don't need to ask probing questions. But I think from a overall governance perspective, and in light of the amendments, the fast-track amendments to the regulations in September last year, where pension funds can invest in unsecured securities, private debt and equity, and those classes or types of investments are a little bit more risky. I think it is incumbent on Board of Trustees to actually look at the pension funds that they're charged with overseeing, ask probing questions about, you know, are there any investments now that are have a higher credit risk? Is it that if you have real estate, is it that the tenants don't want to pay the leases, they're asking for deferrals? Is that the corporate bonds that are invested in the portfolio, are they paying on time or asking for deferrals? What are your exposures to different sectors in the industries? So we know in Jamaica that tourism is greatly impacted, and they're in direct and indirect exposure to tourism sector. So I think overall, as part of the investment community, while the investment managers will take on that responsibility from a fiduciary perspective to ensure that the best decisions are made, the Board of Trustees overall collectively should engage their investment professionals more now to find out what are the exposures, the sectors, and what are they doing about it.
Agreed, Marie. And I think what trustees, all the trustees in the meeting need to appreciate is that you are personally on the line for the decisions that you make.
personally. Your name is going to be on the front of the gleaner. Your name is going to be on the claim form. And it's not going to be an answer to say the investment manager X or the investment manager Y, because even if you're able to get indemnified under the investment management contract or have your fees covered by the sponsor, it's still your name, it's still your reputation, and you won't be able to ask probing questions if you don't know what you don't know. If you have no idea what to ask, you just, I mean, it's almost as if you're just being told something. And I see a comment in one of the participants that many trustees kind of see their responsibilities to the investment managers or the administrators, to the actuary, and they are the ones running the plan, not the trustees. And it's not because sometimes it's a situation where they're uncomfortable asking the questions, they don't know if it's the right question to ask. But if you don't even have fundamental knowledge, because it's not a requirement under law and it's not a requirement to be trained, it's just going to go along, and it's never a problem until it's a problem. And so I really feel that there needs to be a change in that environment, and there needs to be more of a push factor, a push factor to compel trustees to see the importance of training. Because like I said, we have all been in these seminars. It's the same people, usually.
Wow.
Must say
thanks, thanks Marie and Sanya for that response. Cornelia, you want to say go ahead, and then we take Magdalena and Lance's question.
Okay, no problem. So I just wanted to reiterate that we definitely appreciate what both Marie and Sonia has put forward. And in fact, what a number of trustees have expressed. I've seen comments in relation to being appointed a trustee with no training, but we also wanted to remind trustees that they have a responsibility to get this type of training, but also the FSC has a responsibility to make sure that this is done effectively. And for that, we are working on putting in place as best as possible the framework to provide for this. It is a major mandate of ours, and it's something that we are working assiduously at. The very voluntary nature of trustee training at this point is simply a reflection of the environment that we're in. And as the environment changes, as we have more facilities for training, then we will see our response to this change. I assure you the FSC is very cognizant of the issue. And in fact, when we do risk-based assessment, when we assess the quality of the trustees' activities, the governance for the fund, this is one of the things that is taken into consideration, and recommendations are often given where required that trustees should actually go about instituting a training policy for trustees.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Magdalena, Lance, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I'm going to make some comments. First of all, again, I'm going to repeat how glad I am to be on this, on this session and to see the presenters who I've known over the many years and see them develop. However, though, this issue about training and having a course where all pension professionals are certified in the area was brought up when the FSC and so was first starting up with the management or being the regulator for the pension funds and retirement scheme, because I was on a team for that. So I remember it very clear, but it was brushed aside. So I am really glad that the Lord has spared my life that I could come to 2020 and hear it being spoken about, because I knew from then and based on my experience that there's no way you can have a highly regulated environment without people being certified. If you're a practitioner, you should be certified. If you, and like how I do pensions and life insurance, I should get some certification for pensions and life insurance, but there's none of it. So it really, we need to really look at it as an industry. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't start to think of the Pensions Industry Association of Jamaica, where we look at all the players in the pensions industry and train all of them. Train doesn't mean that you have all the knowledge, you know, but training gives you the principles on which you can act and which you can make changes on later on in life, and for the benefit of all the plan members. So I'm really glad, I'm really hoping that, I didn't want to tell you, but I will tell you that I had trustees train them as well. And it's amazing the information they don't know when they come to the sessions that I do with them. So there is a need for training, and there is a need to really get the FSC to really make it as a mandate, put it down as something to be done, and follow through with it, because there's a lot of opportunity there to get people to be trained. Because at the end of the day, what we are really doing, and this is why I do what I do because I want to make a contribution to the reduction in poverty of persons when they get old, disabled, when they die. Their succeeding generations don't have to come and say, give me our money all the time. It's sad. I don't know how sad you all feel, but it's sad when I go on the road and I see the number of people begging the road expanding more and more and more. We haven't done a good job. And when you make that statement that you haven't done a good job, then you say, okay, where am I weak? Training. So I couldn't get in Jamaica, so I went elsewhere. I got my training in law, pensions, everything. But we need the training. We really, really do need it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And let me just say to Magdalena, we don't normally allow free advertisement, but so we got away with that one in terms of advertising your training facility, okay?
I'm not doing free advertising. I'm just saying to you, because I couldn't get it locally and because I got access to knowledge, I decided to share it with others. That's really, I didn't give you the name.
And I'm just being cheeky. I'm just being cheeky.
I know. I'm just saying, I was so passionate about it then. I'm passionate about it now. And I'm happy that FSC is even considering it and really going to put it on the books to get it up and running by 2021. There's nothing to stop it, you know. The professionals are here to get it going. I don't know what has delayed it over 14 years. Over 14 years, you know, I'm on this thing and more. I really hope and pray, and I'm going to include them in my prayers tonight. Dear Lord, please make FSC make this training mandatory for all the different players in the sector. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Lance, your question, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is about a report that I saw, some disclosure that was made in November of 2019 on the eve of the pandemic, where it was reported that half of the 807 registered pension funds and retirement schemes in Jamaica were inactive at that time. Is the situation still the same? And if not, what has been happening to improve on this pathetic condition? I think it goes to either members of the Executive Pension Industry Association, either Sanya or Cornelia.
Okay, so just to be clear, I'm not a part of the Pension Industry Association, but I wanted to provide some context for that statistics. You would have had a number of pension plans in play when the FSC came into being. Some of these pension plans would have been very small pension plans that observed that given the governance requirements of what it takes to effectively manage a pension fund, it was not practical to continue as a superannuation fund. And so they elected instead to wind up the superannuation fund and invest instead into a retirement scheme. So while you have seen that the number of pension funds that have wound up have increased, and still remains the case that over half of them over time have actually wound up, what you would not have seen is that there is a decrease in assets invested towards pension fund benefits. What you would not have seen is a decrease in the number of members that are participating in pension fund arrangements. The context of the number of inactive funds is just simply an issue of the market conditions. Additionally, you would have had defined benefit plans were very popular in Jamaica. You would have found that a number of pension funds may have wound up in favor of creating a new DC plan, defined contribution plan. So these are all factors that have actually resulted in those figures. So the figures in relation to the number of funds that have wound up themselves are not detrimental to the industry, but are rather a reaction to the need for enhanced governance, for better management, and also the expansion of the retirement scheme products that have been provided.
Thanks much.
Okay, we have, I'm still out of questions, but we're winding down. We have two tough questions, and these might be our last, depending on how, in fact, they seem to be directed at Cornelia. So the first one, Cornelia, hopefully you're bracing yourself. And the question has to do with the impact of COVID on the pension industry. So as at the end of December, in terms of the size of the assets in pension funds, about 700 billion. The question is whether you're at liberty to say what was the impact of COVID on this 700 billion in terms of percentage loss in value.
Okay, since then we have received preliminary reports on the asset value as at March 2020, which would have been when most of the movement would have taken place, and we would have seen in some instances as much as a 30% fall off in some asset classes. But bear in mind, this is not reflective of a 30% fall off in the entire industry. Rather, what we have seen based on the preliminary numbers is somewhere around a 10% to 12%, 10, 11, 12% fall off in total industry assets. Undoubtedly, the fall off in assets would have affected pension plans as at March, but since March, there has been some amount of recovery as primarily the assets that were affected were, of course, equities as well as bond prices. And for those who are familiar with the industry, would realize that there were some bonds that were trading at significant premiums prior to March. So while there has been some amount of recovery in some of the asset prices, the fall off that we saw as at March was roughly somewhere around 10 to 12%.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to give you a chance to catch your breath, Cornelia. I'm going to put this question to Sanya and Marie. It's from Andrew, and I'm just going to try and paraphrase. So in a sense, Andrew is asking the question, Andrew Jones. We have been talking about having professionally trained trustees to carry out the mandates that we have been discussing. But so the question is, how is it going to be possible to have professionally trained trustees, because it takes a while for them to build up that expertise when we're in an environment where their tenure as, let's call them sponsored trustees, is not even certain. So how do you propose that the industry gets to that stage where we have professionally trained trustees when, you know, just year over year, person's tenure in terms of their substantive jobs, bit uncertain?
I think though that, so a couple of things. One, remember that your tenure as a trustee is not linked to your employment, though oftentimes it changes as a result of your employment. So you have many people who remain or are trustees of pension plans where they're either sponsor or member nominated trustees, and they actually do not work for the company. But those tend to be the exceptions. I want to step away from the phrase professionally trained trustees, because I'm not sure what we mean when we say that. I think what we're trying to advocate here, or certainly what I would say the PIAJ advocates, is basic training. Let's start with some basic training. Fundamental principles around governance, fundamental principles around conflicts of interest, principles around investment, management of pension funds, trustee duties. What does that look like? Having your legal advisor or other professional walk you through the deed and rules, because let's face it, nobody wants to sit down and read a 60-page document, but it's the Bible when it comes to running your pension plan. So you have to understand what it means. So take somebody who will do a page turner, taking you through. All of that is training. Some of the trustees on the call, I know they participate in those kinds of exercises. So I don't want us to overthink what we mean when we advocate for training. We're talking about understanding the principles, because too often the trustees are getting it wrong on simple things. And it's those simple things that if they're just gotten a better understanding of what their role looks like and what the expectations of them are, these kinds of decisions wouldn't be made. Remember, we're not talking about those plans that meet regularly, that are compliant. There are a lot of plans that are not hitting the target. I'll give you an example. I was called the other day by an administrator where the trustees wanted to increase the pension benefits for the pensioners. Now, by the way, the chairman of this board is a lawyer. He's a senior partner in a well-established law firm. So I'm just trying to say this is somebody who is well-educated. And they were advocating to increase the benefits of pensioners, but not all of them, just some of the pensioners, because they were the ones who did not have family members to look after them. the chairman was confident that the pensioners that he felt need not get an increase were fine because they had family members that could look after them. I mean, that's fundamentally wrong. The discrimination that's driving that is just wrong. But he honestly felt genuinely that it was an appropriate consideration. You shouldn't factor who has family to look after you and who doesn't have family to look after you. But so if even at the level of a chairman who is an attorney at law, decades of practice, could get it so wrong, you have to understand that just basic understanding of what your job function is, what your duties are, what your exposure looks like. You know, everybody's kind of going along thinking this is a part of my job. It's not a part of your job. It functions quite independently of your job. And so, or it ought to. And so that's what I mean when I say trustee training. So I don't want us to think, you know, at the end of it, you're going to have a degree in law or a degree in actuarial. It's not like that. It's just understanding basic training. And if it happens with sufficient regularity in bite-size amounts, then it really doesn't matter how often you're changed as a trustee or how long your tenure is. It doesn't matter, because while you are there, you have to discharge your function. And best believe, if you screwed up while you were there for a year and something blows up, 2 or 3 years later, you were part of that decision-making machinery. And so you are still exposed. And so I want trustees to appreciate that whilst there are different ways in which you can be protected in terms of indemnification and insurance policies, etc., reputationally, you want to ensure you discharge your duties properly. Forget all the protection. At the end of the day, nobody wants to be having to defend their name and their decision making before a court. So we're talking about basic principles and understanding that ceding the responsibility to the investment manager, the lawyer, and the actuary, not going to protect you.
Hugh, I wanted to add a comment based on what Lance had asked Cornelia a question about the reduction in was it Hugh? Can't remember. The reduction in the portfolio values since March based on the market dynamics. I wanted to add something to that. We're all aware that the pension funds have long-term horizons, but I think it is important from a governance perspective that Board of Trustees look back at their SIPs. So yes, the SIP is designed for achieving long-term objective, but in an environment like this, we'll have to overlay on it. How long will it last for? Is the plan sufficiently funded to withstand this volatility? Are members fully apprised of and aware of what is going on and the likely impact? Are you providing constant or more frequent communication to members just based on how the plan can be and is being impacted by these kind of market dynamics? So it could be a case where after you consult with your investment manager, your actuary, or your administrator, no changes is required to the asset mix or any other provisions in the SIP. But it is important that even though a SIP is required to be reviewed on an annual basis in a significant market event, I think it warrants just looking back at it, speaking to your investment manager to make sure that everything is still consistent with what the objectives of the fund are for the members and the beneficiaries.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think with that comment, we can conclude, and already there is so much material for us to start planning for next year. When each of the trustee represented here today will be sufficiently motivated to bring your fellow trustees out. Sanya made the point that the persons on the call today, these are some of the familiar faces. And so I think for us to move to the next level and to build on some of what we heard this morning in terms of the ethics governance training, plus whatever we're just discussing now between Cornelia, Sanya, and Marie, it's just to really move the needle in a big way. There are roughly 400 plans. The next time around, a year or so from now, it's important just to bring some of the other trustees on board. By that time, I look at Cornelia's face and I'm confident that the whole training framework and in terms of the content, the trustee training will be worked out. So, FSC will be embarking on its first trustee training. Based on what I'm seeing in the chat, persons are asking for basic training, continuous training, and then we can move to an intermediate level. the last thing I would just say is that some persons came on late. The various presentations as well as the session would have been recorded for persons who want to listen to it again quietly over a cup of coffee, as well as just to share with your fellow trustees who weren't able to attend today. And so I just want to thank firstly Cornelia for putting her neck on the line once again, taking us through some thought-provoking stuff, risk-based, give us a sense for the impact of COVID, and also bringing to life what our governance responsibilities are, whether we're dealing with a super and fund or we're dealing with an approved retirement scheme, as well as for the ever-faithful PIAJ president and director Sania and Marie, just for co-partner with CFA Society Jamaica in terms of delivering content to you. And I know Dr. Macmillan is still on the line. I want to thank him again. And all I would say is that, I'm just going to implore everybody to have the discussion continue. And hopefully by next year, the phase 2 pension regs will have been passed. So, our jobs as pension trustees will be that much more exciting. And so just to leave on a very sober note, importantly, at the end of the day, if something slips, it's your name that will be in the observer or the gleaner. So, each day when you get up and you embark on your duties, remember, it's not the investment manager, it's not the administrator, it's your photo. And they typically use some photos that don't look so good. So let's try to keep yourself out of the media. And so with that, I thank you on behalf of CFA Society Jamaica. I know some of the directors are actually online. Brian Fraser, our president, is online as well as some of the other directors. So thank you for your time and thank you for allowing us to go a little beyond midday, but discussion was rich. So take care and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This was really interesting and informative. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Wonderful session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.